hear me all right? Yay. Then we'll begin. For thousands of years, intelligent men and women have known that there lives within, somewhere in their brains, a universe of wonder and novelty and creativity that can be accessed, booted on, and turned up. But for thousands of years, no one has been able to express or describe these wonders within. Typically, people come back from exploring their brains, saying, wow.
In the 1970s, a group of architects wrote a book called A Pattern Language. In it, they describe how buildings and cities could be transformed from structures to infrastructures, how the built environment can be alive, social, and human. The book presents design approaches to 253 built spaces, including a home for one, a bus shelter, a children's home, and an individually owned shop. A pattern is a unit in the book. It is a recurring problem in the environment. Each pattern comes with a solution that might be replicated multiple times over without ever being done in the same way twice. This is because each solution is broad and narrow at the same time, part of an existing field of relationships that respect local context. A pattern language lets you engage with a system that is much too complex to describe with any overarching theory. All you can do is make little observations in the hope that others can cobble them together usefully. George and I are going to tell you two stories from a pattern language about the digital ecosystem that we inhabit. One story is about the shared history of psychedelics and the tech industry. The other is about the fraying of the internet as a source of shared knowledge about our feelings of living in a networked society. You will discover that the two stories are in fact one. This should not feel like a confession, but it does. I have the CoStar astrology app, and I follow Chani Nicholas on Instagram. CoStar is
the astrology app that deciphers the mystery of human relations through AI and NASA data that tracks the movement of the stars to deliver custom predictions with biting truth. Astrology puts our temporary bodies in context with the universe's vastness, allowing irrationality to invade our techno-rationalist ways of living.
The Chani astrology app is lively and colorful. It actively foregrounds decoloniality, justice, embodiment, and rights into its analysis of the Mercury cazimi with the sun, the Venus retrograde, and the coming red moon eclipse on the weekend. What unites both CoStar and Chani is the project of self-improvement. The assumption is that informational systems whose scales are too big and too mysterious to fathom have an influence on our being, because we are also part of nature, the universe, and the cosmos. In profiles of CoStar and Chani, the New York Times and Vogue magazine, among others, identify a resurgence of astrology in the West. Well-being, wellness, integrative medicine, and alternate therapies are part of an industry that is worth more than $4.4 trillion this year. It was worth about $500 billion more before the pandemic. According to an industry research group, the Global Wellness Institute, close to 75% of diseases are non-communicable and lifestyle-related, so wellness has emerged.
As a consumer industry that includes exercise, healthy eating, self-care, mindfulness, stress reduction, healthy aging, complementary medicine, holistic health, and other wellness practices. Wellness has become a value system used to filter daily life and decision-making, with a growing focus on issues such as food quality and the way that food is prepared and consumed, mitigating stress and boosting mental wellness, incorporating movement into daily activities, environmental consciousness, the yearning for connection, the desire for self-actualization, and a search for happiness.
why do I feel like I'm telling you a secret? Like watching porn, doesn't everyone read their horoscope or do the tarot? But it does feel like a confession, because we're now in territory where a constellation of knowledge systems in everyday life are all aligned and colliding. Salt therapy, yoga, and aromatherapy are associated with juicing and psilocybin and astrology. And all of these are positioned along the edge of a deep chasm between rationality and irrationality, between science, capital S, and everything that is deemed not. Rationality is like a delightful little toxin, like the one in the Japanese pufferfish, fugu. It can be delicious as sashimi, but also poisonous unless expertly sliced. The thrill is in the risk and in the appreciation of the skill in navigating that risk. In her new book, Doppelganger, A Trip into the Mirror World, Naomi Klein writes that the COVID-19 pandemic accentuated the split between communities who are less suspicious of science and its institutions and wellness influencers who are critical of masking mandates and vaccinations, seeing nefarious plots and conspiracies in them. She also notes that the wellness industry is comprised of many small businesses and was significantly hit by COVID-19 restrictions. The question persists, though, says Klein, why did community theaters or other small businesses that were equally hit by restrictions not become sites of COVID conspiracy theories? It has to do with the body. In her study of the political economy of wellness, gyms, and health, Barbara Ehrenreich says that the world feels out of control, that when the world feels out of control, we return to that which we can control, our own bodies. In the weird solitude and silence of the gym, we are only ever talking to our doppelgangers, a different self who will inhabit a particular kind of aspirational body. There's a lot about our worlds that feels overwhelming and complex. Everyday people in the Victorian era felt a similar kind of overwhelming complexity. The explosion of industrial-scale media technologies and the professionalization of psychology and medicine resulted in a crisis of faith and in social institutions and relationships. Scholars suggest that the uptick of interest in paranormal, supernatural, and spiritual phenomena at the time was a response to deeply unsettling changes. There are some parallels in the emergence of AI. There is framework world. In this world, communities in industry, government, and business want to develop ethical AI, fairness toolkits, and auditing frameworks. They want to make the most law-abiding, well-behaved, ethical, more than human artificial intelligence, artificial general intelligence. In frameworks world, AI can be fair, transparent, explainable, and unbiased. This is how it can be integrated into our social, economic, and public systems in order to extract value and grow the economy. But there is little reckoning with power, powerlessness, inequality, or any of the hard material constraints on imagining and inhabiting this AI future. And then there is the world of healers and dreamers. They invoke feminism, data justice, decoloniality, watery star signs, femme sci-fi futures, and the intelligence of foggy, cold, faraway planets like Neptune. There is poetry, art, mysticism, meditation, dancing, and community. They channel breath to commune with sentient life that may or may not include AGI. They seek transformation through relationality. But most critically, they attend to connections not made on the terms set by neural networks. Fuck the algorithm. Feminist healing world is a response to the anxieties and inequalities associated with the totalizing power of big tech. It is a response to diminished power and agency and the loss of ideological and rhetorical leverage. In turning to face the dark power of industrial scale, feminist healing world brings mysterious and powerful systems of knowledge to reckon with the so-called intelligence, we're told, that resides inside the high vector matrix multiplication of transformer models.
It's January 1966. We're in San Francisco, at the Longshoremen's Hall at North Point. It's a strangely shaped building. The roof kind of looks like a squashed-up football. Technically, This is the home of the Sailors' Union, but the sailors never really spend any time here. This weekend, however, well, inside, we've got a massive sound system, we've got light-bending displays, there are liquid projections, there's a sensorium, there are high-energy experiments, there is an endless explosion, and there is a God box. The Grateful Dead are playing. The audience here are in their finest day glow, and most of them have taken psychedelics. In the middle of the hall is a trampoline. The man arrives in midair wearing a ski mask. He dives down from a high balcony onto the elastic mat, which bounces him straight back up again as he twists and somersaults through a flash of strobe lights. And then, as quickly as it began, it's over. He shimmies off into the crowd, taking $50 from the organizers as he goes. And the crowd are wondering, was he ever there at all? This is the Trips Festival. It is not just a music festival. It is a new medium of communication and entertainment. It starts out chilled on the Friday, but by Sunday, as the flyer says,
the general tone of things has moved from the self-conscious happening to a more jubilant occasion where the audience participates because it's more fun to do so than not. Audience dancing is an assumed part of all the shows, and the audience is invited to wear ecstatic dress and to bring their own gadgets. AC outlets will be provided.
But this isn't somewhere to just space out and chill after a hard day, or to dance away the stress of the working week. This is countercultural revolution. The festival pushes back at the military technocracy of the Cold War. The festival is a reaction to the command and control technologies which had emerged from cybernetic research in previous decades. The festival is a comeback to those new distant systems of technologies which operate at a distance far beyond the control of the people that they affect. The festival is the counter-remedy. Instead of being controlled from above, why not crack people's heads open and let them feel like what it would be to be part of the system? And if you think that this would probably involve giving people a sack of hallucinogens and setting them loose in a room full of performance art and psychedelic music, you would be absolutely right. In a few months' time, at another similar event in San Francisco, the psychologist and psychedelics enthusiast Timothy Leary will encourage people to
tune on, tune in, drop out.
By which he means step away from a mainstream culture that exerts control over you. Instead, with the help of hallucinogens perhaps, tune in to inner freedom, to yourself.
Unhappily, my explanations of this sequence of personal development are often misinterpreted to mean get stoned and abandon all constructive activity.
Thank you, Timothy Leary. The sounds here and the vibes all might feel like an anarchic fantasia of the senses, but there is very careful planning behind the trampoline. One of the festival's organizers, Stuart Brand, has been inspired by immersive media art, and in particular, he follows the work of a collective who set up dance parties in abandoned aircraft hangars. They build huge, hexagonal, 9-feet-high structures which the audience sit around as they inhale incense. This isn't artwork to just sit in front of. Instead, as the psychoactive drugs kick in, the audience become part of the performance. At the Trips Festival, a series of closed-circuit televisions broadcast footage of the audience back at themselves, looping round and round. Communications scholar Fred Turner describes how these moments of anarchic togetherness and embodied experiential magic were intended to bring about the countercultural critiques of technocratic dominance. You could become overwhelmed and numb in the face of the sublime scale and power of the vast controlling systems of society. But instead, an ecstatic union could be created by combining sounds, lights, bodies, and mind-altering substances, an eternal now, where the observer and the system were the same thing, existing together.
Bruce Robbins writes about the sweatshop sublime. This is a shared dilemma that our daily existence of coffee, laptops, t-shirts, and pretty much everything else around us is made possible by vast apparatuses of extractive, unequal, and sometimes violent logistical flows of people, people's labor, and their planetary resources. The dilemma is not that they exist, but that we can know and map them in detail, and that when the time comes to hold them to account for their excesses, we are sometimes unable to do so. Robbins was referring to activism against sweatshop labor in the 2000s. The dilemma is a moment of awareness that we are capable of such creativity and ingenuity within deeply hierarchical societies that we are unable to change. This awareness of imagination and inadequacy is sublime, says Robbins, a feeling of awe quickly followed by overwhelmed immobilization. The algorithmic sublime is similar. We cannot yet map algorithmic influences and architectures in their totality, but not for want of trying. In the past decade, there have been significant efforts to know and see the architectures of algorithmic and data-driven systems. Art, research, investigations, and campaigns about how data-driven technologies reshape our social relations and politics are there. They show us the scale of the interactions. But we can never still quite comprehend them. We are in a world made by and for computation. What we already see and know only serves to haunt the magnitude of the not known and the not seen. The negative pleasure of the sublime is not a place one wants to rest in, however. We experience an expansion of the imagination of all that is possible and then sink back into inaction. The sublime can be a place of discomfort. It is affective and it is fearful. Christopher Kitson says in his work, Legacies of the Sublime,
mathematically sublime objects make us fear not for our physical well-being, but for our cognitive abilities.
The fact that we cannot fully comprehend or manage these systems can be overwhelming when we realize how our sense of self is so tightly bound to them. Tung Weiwei refers to our age as one of lethargy and disconnection. While our platforms and devices clamor for liveness and attention, we find ourselves becoming passive, disconnected, and unable to make decisions beyond click, swipe, and like. We cannot be ourselves because selfhood has become a site of digital pressure to perform and engage. He narrates that digital lethargy is a condition omniscient of ailments plaguing a newly industrialized global northern world. One ailment was neurasthenia. Weiwei paraphrases the neurologist William Beard, who said in the 1890s of neurasthenia that it
mainly affected the brain workers, whose supply of nervous energy was destroyed by the impositions of industrial life, urban life, and it affected high-class girls with their delicate nervous systems, unfit for the demands of life emerging in major cities.
So the solutions and frameworks and critiques and policy toolkits for AI and AI ethics to mitigate algorithmic excesses, they have their place. But the work of living through uncertainty of social and environmental collapse requires a different set of modalities of care and connection. So we're building critique from within spaces of capture, from within despair. We are leveraging humor and sarcasm, art, delight, and pleasure. We're searching for exits from the immobilizing sublime.
We are not in San Francisco anymore. We are driving deep into the alkali deserts of Nevada. That's right, we are going to the Burning Man Festival. But even though we're 300 miles away from the Bay Area, there are still an awful lot of people from San Francisco here in the desert. Is this just the modern evolution of West Coast counterculture? If you were here in the 1980s when the festival began, it might have felt that way, when the desert filled up with
desert survivalists, urban primitives, artists, rocketeers, hippies, deadheads, queers, pyromaniacs, cybernauts, musicians, ranters, eco-freaks, acid heads, breeders, punks, gun lovers, dancers, SM and bondage enthusiasts, nudists, refugees from the men's movement, anarchists, ravers, and New Age spiritualists.
And some of those folks are still here, if they can afford to come. By now, we're kind of into the middle 2000s. We've been joined by other people. Now, technologists, designers, marketers, and even senior executives have come out. We are still in the desert, where the temperature can climb to 100 degrees Fahrenheit during the day and below freezing at night. And the landscape is still filled with massive sculptures, but now the installations are getting bigger. They're getting more technically impressive. The engineers who build them bring everything they need out into the desert: the wiring, the rigs, the generators. The infrastructure of this festival is the festival. This is what Fred Turner describes as silicon Pentecostalism, and it is a different form of transcendence. Many of the people involved in assembling these enormous structures are technologists, and they work for the companies that create the increasingly pervasive and complex platforms and systems. To be clear, these massive artworks in the desert are not worshipful totems to software as a service, but they are instead what Fred Turner describes as
the pursuit of vocational ecstasy.
That is, the pleasure comes not only from seeing the enormous artworks, but also from making them. Here, people who are skilled with metalwork, code, digital design, lighting, physical engineering, and so much more come together for, as Fred Turner says,
for many of the participants, the ecstasies of making and encountering art also represent idealized forms of intense focus and camaraderie of professional project engineering.
So this, here at Burning Man, it's like going to work, but better. You have the best technical production team who are all super motivated to make good work. Thank you. You have really chewy engineering challenges that might involve a flamethrower. You have all the satisfaction of flow. And of course, there is the pleasure of appreciating and vibing out in the desert to these mega structures, which wouldn't be the same if they'd been shipped in, made by somewhere else from some anonymous industrial workshop. What would Timothy Leary have made of all of this? Acid culture was inherently introspective. It encouraged people to turn away from mainstream culture to focus on the self. And here in Nevada, the teams might be tuning in and turning on to the pleasure of creating with technology, but they're not dropping out of the larger industrial systems. But then again, who can? Even Timothy Leary himself has been swallowed up by the machine. Here he is, on camera, giving a talk about, well, take it away, Timothy.
For thousands of years, intelligent men and women have known that there lives within, somewhere in our brains, a universe of wonder and of novelty and innovation and creativity. This can be accessed, booted up, turned on, activated by skillful people lucky enough to know how to do this. But for thousands of years, no one has been able to express or describe these wonders within. Typically, people come back from exploring their brains saying, wow.
This isn't a talk to acid converts. This is a promotional video for Autodesk, the computer-aided design and manufacturing software company. Sorry, carry on.
Now here at Autodesk, a band of explorers have assembled and given us the hardware and software to go beyond and through the screen to inhabit and move around in the cybernetic universe. The best way to describe this is in the most homely terms. It's like an aquarium. When you look at a boob tube,
television,
or put your nose against the computer screen, you're looking at a digital universe in there. In the past, all you could do was just look at it or change the dials. Now, with the cyberspace techniques, you can go to the other side of the screen and swim around in the aquarium of meaning, meet other people there, and design computer-aided reality. Our prophet William Gibson has described the digital matrix, the consensual hallucination of all human knowledge. Here at Autodesk, it's called cyberspace, and it's a nice place to be.
Thank you, Timothy Leary. So this tug of finding mind-expanding ways to share the dream of disembodiment with digital technology is real. The desire to escape the limits of the flesh to enter fluid electronic realms is real. There's talk at the moment here in 2023 of a psychedelic renaissance funded by venture capital, and that makes sense. You know, here we still want new ways to exist peacefully and collectively with the enormous technological systems such as AI that fill and transform our world. But these technologies aren't existing in a void. They operate within existing systems and structures and reproduce their power dynamics. And now the introspection of earlier years has morphed into a form of individual optimization. The medical humanities scholar Nezé Desirot describes how the use case for the new psychedelics isn't one of healing, connection, or creative expression. Instead, psychedelics are now seen as tools to either increase productivity or to soften up the vast body of workers into accepting the new forms of work which are being built onto them. Unlike cyberspace, this world of material inequality is not a nice place to be. And with apologies to William Gibson, just because the psychedelic renaissance is here doesn't mean that it's evenly distributed. The elite tech executives who set these systems in motion are still taking hallucinogens at out-of-town retreats. Only now, when they come back, they report that their psychedelic-induced insights have revealed lucrative solutions to mankind's biggest problem, nothing that really disrupts the status quo. As Nézet Dezenot describes, taking psychedelics is seen as the fastest route for executives to gain business insights, priming them to interpret their experience as confirmation of their own beliefs. The only doors of perception that are being opened here are those that lead into the boardroom.
A pattern language lets you engage with a system that is much too complex to describe with any one overarching theory. A pattern language of the digital must design for negative space. It is not only that we do not trust science and its institutions, but so many ways of knowing things have been slowly coming apart. It is not only that enormous systems such as the internet and artificial intelligence seem intractable and unknowable, but the feel of their presence is loose and fluid. Their effects are hard to measure, but they are here, a cold damp seeping in, impossible to stop. How do you occupy something that has turned into a liquid, swampy bog beneath your feet? There will always be more promises and fantasies broadcast by those hovering above the surface, but the water is rising.
So where does that leave us? Where do we go from here? We inhabit strange systems that have emerged very rapidly, are controlled at distance, and are present in the world in strange and oftentimes upsetting ways. Neither of us are Timothy Leary, offering neat sound bites as a way to deal with all of this. We do not have simple statements which can be too easily co-opted or cover the complex material effects of these systems with a simple explanation. It is fine to be overwhelmed and confused.
And as Sarah Sharma asks, who gets to exit the miasma of confusion and not knowing? Usually those who are already powerful. How do you sustain staying here? Technology has to invalidate the past repeatedly in order to maintain its place in the future. We have to learn to inhabit the uncertainty, threatened to be crushed by a wave. As the journalist Moya Lothian-McLean says, we have to confront our piecemeal and often incoherent politics.
To seek out friction and to learn the language of doubt and the overwhelm.
And if this is it, if this is what we have to do, then we need to seek out science and learn to find our way together.
Thank you.